Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Faith and Family First. I am your host, Eva Andrade, and I'm here with Marcus Oshiro again, and we're going to be looking at a very important issue that has to do with religious freedom, and it is not what you think it is. So stay tuned, and let's chat about that. Welcome to the show today, Marcus.
Hi, Eva.
It's always good to see you across the table.
Very close.
I'm glad you said yes to do this, Marcus, because talking to myself was getting quite boring.
No, this is fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so is there a particular reason you are wearing a suit today?
Well, I'm wearing half a suit today. I put on a coat and tie, but I forgot the coat at home. But I left the tie on. This is in honor of the legislature passing the, major point of the session, the first cross, where the House bills go to the Senate, Senate bills go to the House. The great third reading in both chambers have occurred last week, and here we are on March 12th.
Yep. So when people are listening to this, it's going to be the end of the week, which means anything interesting could have happened in the few days between the day we're taping this and the day we actually do that. Yeah. So that's why people have to stay tuned into the show, because things change all the time.
And we try and keep up to speed on all the activities going on there at the Square Building in Britannia.
Yes. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, Marcus, and I know that it was also of interest to you, we're going to talk about religious freedom, but we're going to talk about religious freedom in a way that is not normally thought about. Yeah. And so we're going to be talking about a bill that Hawaii Family Forum has not weighed in on the bill. However, it did pique our attention, and we have kind of watched it over the years as it's changed. And this is a bill relating to midwifery. So
midwifery.
That is our.
What is midwifery?
Midwifery. I love that. In fact, if we could play Sesame Street music, we could do that. This is the new word for the day. Midwifery. Not midwifery.
Okay.
It's midwifery. And of course, midwives are those individuals that help in the birthing process. And most of the time they do it in the comfort of their patient's home.
Oh, yeah.
So rather than it being in a hospital setting, and a lot of people choose that. Now, the reason it becomes a religious freedom issue is because this has been part of the Native Hawaiian practice for a very long time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So in order to build a little bit of why we're here and why we're even talking about this. So in 1931, the state of Hawaii began regulating midwives. So it started back in 1931, and they established a registration requirement. And then fast forward a few years, and the regulation, it progresses right from registration to certification, and then ultimately to licensure.
Oh, my.
Okay, so that's kind of how it went. In 1998, the regulation of midwives was repealed when nurse midwives were placed under the purview of the Board of Nursing. Okay, so that happened in 1998. And then from 1999 and 2017, there were two audits that were done. The first one, it was requested that the state auditor would conduct a sunrise analysis to determine if regulation of midwives was warranted.
And a sunrise analysis is commonly done by the auditor to determine the appropriateness of having the regulations.
Perfect, right? And so they did that in 1999. They redid it in 2017. So there were two studies by the audit. And basically the auditor came back and said, yes, there needs to be some kind of licensure for these midwives, right? So in 2019, the legislature passed Act 32, which established a regulatory framework for midwifery. And it was codified as Chapter 457J under our Hawaii Revised Statutes.
Yes.
That in 2019, I will tell you, we were watching the bill back then. There was major outcry from the population, especially Native Hawaiian practitioners, because they felt like something that they're trained to do as part of their religious belief system. Why should they have to go through all these licensure requirements and all of that, right? So there was a big thing that happened. Unfortunately, that the legislature did pass it, and so it fell under this licensing, but it was sunset to stop in 2025. Right?
That's this year.
Right.
June 30th?
In June 30th this year.
Wow.
So that's why they're talking about it again in 2025.
I see.
Because something's going to happen on June 30th, 2025, if they do nothing.
Yeah, like March, April, May, June, like 4 months away.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so, of course, now you're back to the same arguments from before. People coming out and saying, no, we don't want this kind of rigorous licensing because we're doing this as a matter of our faith.
Right.
And then, of course, you have the medical community coming out saying, no, but this is a matter of safety. We want to make sure that these people that are practicing midwifery are trained and that if there's trouble, they know what to do and vice versa. Now, the thing that got our attention and why we're doing the show today is because of what happened on third reading.
Yes.
In the House, right? So
Yes.
as we've been talking over the last couple of shows, what happens is bills move through a process. All bills have to go through 3 readings in each chamber.
Yes.
The first one is pro forma, right?
Yes.
Which is just basically it's assigned to whatever committees
Yes.
that it's going to hear. Second reading is normally after it passes its
First hearing.
the first
in
hearing
a committee, subject matter committee.
Yep. And so a lot of times, and we talk about this because a lot of times legislators vote yes on second reading, but they don't like the bill,
That's correct.
right? So we have to educate people that
Yes.
that's not always, although this session we saw several bills did die in second reading.
Yes.
So it can happen.
It can happen.
Yeah,
It does happen.
it does happen. So that's kind of interesting. And then after it makes it through all of its committees, you have to have a third reading where it's sent to the floor and everybody votes on it.
That's correct.
And then it's sent over to the opposite chamber to start all over again.
Yes.
So 3 readings again.
In each chamber.
I do want to do a quick segue, Marcus, though, because you and I were talking this morning. The one difference on this is constitutional amendment questions, right? So why don't you share with people why that one's a little different? I mean, you still have to have your 3 readings, right? It still has to pass. But a constitutional amendment, there's an additional step that has to take place.
Yeah, it has to pass 3 readings in both chambers, both House and Senate. And it can be done several ways before it gets to the governor's desk for his enrollment. One way is to have a majority of the votes in the House, majority of the votes in the Senate, 2 consecutive sessions to get approved. Then it goes to the governor for consideration in the next general election. Or in one session, like this session, there can be a supermajority of votes in the House and in the Senate to get it up to the governor's desk for consideration. But it has to have 3 readings in both chambers in order for it to go to the governor's desk.
And there is something that could happen, which we noticed. Well, we know this process, but there were people in the community that didn't understand the process. They saw that in Senate Bill 350, that's the constitutional amendment related to contraceptives
That's right.
that we've been watching. A few of the people noticed that suddenly there was an entry that said transmitted to the governor for notice.
That's correct.
So
That's
they
correct.
thought that meant that the legislature was fast tracking the bill, but that is not the case.
No, it's not the case. It still has to go for a hearing. In fact, if you look at that particular reference sheet on that bill, Senate Bill
350.
350, it will show that it was referred to several House committees on the cross. I think it was Health, CPC maybe, and Finance or something like that. So there's going to be public hearing and comment on that particular constitutional amendment.
Yeah, so our Constitution just says that you have to notify the governor
Yes.
on a constitutional amendment question. So for those of you that are starting to get into the legislative process, please do not freak out when you see stuff like this. We're watching, we know, and we'll tell you when it's time for you to contact the legislature. Okay, so going back to this midwifery bill. So on the floor, on third reading, I saw one of the best floor speeches on a bill that I have seen in a long time. Now, people in their floor speeches, they can get up and they can talk about why they love the bill and why they're supporting it. In this case, Representative Della Bellotti opposed the bill, and she wanted to let people know that she had a better idea. And so one of the things that can happen is she offered a floor amendment to the bill.
That's right. And that's extraordinary because normally you will not lay down an amendment to a bill that's on the floor set for third reading, final passage to the next chamber. But in this case, Representative Bellotti, and to her credit, And maybe I'm wearing blue today because she is a Democrat. She's an active Democrat. I think she's been there for maybe 15 plus years, maybe 18 years. So she's a well-respected Democrat leader in that chamber. She felt compelled, based upon her reading of the bill, that it needed to be fixed. And the fix on a floor would be a floor amendment. And she proposed it.
She proposed it. So what we're going to play for you, you're actually going to get to hear her 5-minute floor speech. What I love about that is she also, in this floor amendment, she also is telling you why she's concerned. And why she's an attorney. I mean, for people listening that may not know, she is an attorney. So she's looking at this through the eyes of a legal lens.
Yes.
And so we'll share with you now the floor speech of Representative Della Bellotti from Makiki. No, is she Makiki? Yeah, from Makiki.
Representative Bellotti.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In support of this floor amendment.
Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, I offer this floor amendment with the deepest of aloha for all of my colleagues in this chamber, especially to the chairs this year who worked so diligently on this matter, to the members of the Women's Legislative Caucus who over the years have worked on the measures that have led up to the current law, and to my colleague from Kapolei who seconded this floor amendment. In my 18 years, Madam Speaker, this is an unusual thing for me to do. I don't and cannot recall a time when a floor amendment has been offered on a measure where members of two different parties have moved and seconded it. But it is that reason, it is that the importance of this measure and this floor amendment that's spoken to in the offering of this. This floor amendment makes 3 substantively important changes. First, in the area of protections of constitutional rights. I have said on this floor in the past that one of the North Stars guiding our decision-making on this floor is respect for our Constitution, the United States Constitution and the Hawaii State Constitution. I would also add to that, as a guiding North Star, our community. It is because of the Constitution and the community that one of the areas of changes introduced by this floor amendment adds a religious exemption that honors our constitutional obligation to protect the free exercise of religion. As stated in Article 1, Section 4 of the Hawaii State Constitution. This bill already protects and honors our obligation under Hawaii State Constitution, Article 12, Section 7, that obligates the state and obligates us, the legislature, to protect all rights customarily and traditionally exercised for subsistence, cultural, and religious purposes by Native Hawaiians. I do want to acknowledge that the bill does that, but we equally have to protect our right to exercise of religion, and I am more and more concerned that this is a right that we may be disregarding. So that is the first area of importance. The religious exemption added into this floor amendment mirrors the same religious exemption that we have in HRS Chapter 457-13 for nurses. So we already have that in statute for other nurses, for other healthcare providers, and it is appropriate for this measure.
Can we stop right there?
We can.
Let's really highlight the fact that what Representative Bellotti is doing right now is extraordinary, because she is a well-known, well-respected Democrat. She is a member of the Women's Caucus. I think the Women's Caucus is comprised of 20 or 21 members of the House. So that's a sizable majority that had listed this particular bill as a priority. This was a priority bill for the Women's Caucus.
So for her to come up and bring up a concern about a bill that was brought up by them, it's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary because she might be pushing back on some of her colleagues who are women who are members of the caucus. Well,
I love it because as we continue, you're going to hear this, but it's so well thought out.
Yes.
This floor amendment that ultimately failed.
Yes.
Ultimately failed. However, the way that it was put together was so well thought out. She made she made it clear from the beginning of her floor speech that she appreciated the work of all the people that
Yes.
have come
Yeah.
before her. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like she got up there and wanted to just attack everybody. As a seasoned attorney,
Yes.
she was looking at this issue through different lens, and I applaud her heroic action to do this.
I do. I do. I think it's one of those things that you can say it's basically a profiling courage moment for Della Al-Baladi, former majority leader. So she's worn the mantle of leadership in the majority caucus for a while. So she knows what's at stake here. But she does this based upon her conscience and her legal background regarding the importance of freedom of religion, both the federal level and on the state level. So I appreciate that. She also acknowledges Hawaii's unique constitution that has provisions regarding traditional culture and
Right.
gathering rights of Native Hawaiians.
Right. And if we believe in religious freedom, then we need to understand that religious freedom extends to all religions.
That's correct.
Right. And so as Christians, sometimes it's hard for us because we'd love to see everybody born again and everybody saved. And that is important to us as faith-based believers. But you have Buddhist believers, you've got Muslim believers, right? You've got Islamic believers, you've got people from different Baha'i faiths and all of
yeah.
this. So if you support religious freedom, you support religious freedom.
And I got friends and family in all those religions. So.
And even some without any religion. That's
true.
one of the
That's
things.
true.
But what and I will also acknowledge that Representative Bellotti does not always agree with us on a lot of issues.
That's correct.
She votes against us on a lot of issues. So what I'm trying to do is highlight that even on those areas that we disagree, we can build relationship, first of all, with these legislators. And I've built a relationship with Representative Bellotti over the years. I'm sure she thought I was crazy in the early days. But what I'm trying to do is highlight that if you build relationship, you will begin to see that there are some things that they do that should get an applause and thanks from those of us in the faith-based community.
Yeah. Give credit where credit is due.
Yes. So let's continue.
The second substantive area that is addressed by this floor amendment is the reinstatement of the birth attendant to deal with traditional practitioners. The reinstatement also includes a change from the underlying law, which adds a very critical, important consumer protection that would have any person who has received a judgment, award, disciplinary sanction, order, or other determination finding that that person has committed misconduct or is criminally or civilly liable for conduct relating to midwifery by another licensing authority shall not qualify for a birth attendant exemption. This is a critical new consumer protection provision that will ensure both the safety of our community as well as honor the practices of traditional practitioners. The third substantive area, Madam Speaker, amended by this floor amendment is to create a pathway so that our people here who do not have access or the resources to go to school far from these shores, it creates a second pathway of certification through the North American Registry of Midwives portfolio evaluation process pathway in order to enable those persons to obtain a midwifery bridge certificate. This secondary pathway is important because, as noted by the Circuit Court that is considering litigation related to this area, the programs currently qualified under the current law and placed in the underlying bill.
Representative Peruso.
I yield my time.
So ordered.
Thank you. The current pathway, both in the underlying bill, has already been determined by the Circuit Court to be an infringement upon individuals' reasonable exercise because they either require excessive education, do not exist in the state, or place unreasonable barriers on those persons and those similarly situated. For all of those reasons, Madam Speaker, I offer this amendment and speak in strong support. Thank you.
So process. When a floor amendment is put forth, Now they're debating. So any speeches that happen from that point is about the floor amendment.
That's
right?
correct.
So if people stand up, they will say support or oppose the floor amendment.
Yes.
And I did not edit Representative Bellatti's clip at all. That was her full speech. She does offer a second floor amendment as well that also fails, which was much shorter. And so if people want to watch the whole thing, they'll see that people stood up to say why they either agreed with her floor amendment or not. And then they took the vote and it ultimately failed.
Yeah. Let me point out one thing that occurred there. It was Representative Peruso, I believe, who stood up and yielded her time. What she did there was give her 5 minutes that she had to speak on the motion itself to Representative Bellotti. And oftentimes that's a sign of courtesy and support for your colleagues to give them enough time. And it's an important point that you have 5 minutes to speak on a particular motion. So someone else could have yielded even more time to Representative Bellotti if she needed it. But I think 5 minutes was enough from Representative Peruso that enabled her to finish her argument. I think a second point I need to make, Eva, I think it's important, is that in this case, there was a roll call vote taken. And normally, you don't have roll call votes. They're normally voice votes.
Whoever shouts the loudest.
Yeah, all in favor say aye, aye. All opposed, nay, no, nay. And it's who shouted the loudest. But in this case, they used a technique of requiring and demanding and compelling a roll call vote. When you go to A to Z, call every single representative present for their vote, yes or no.
And normally somebody in the body has to request the voice vote,
yeah,
right?
You have to request it. It has to be seconded. And then you have to show by a show of hands. You have to raise your hands. And the requisite number is 11. To have a roll call vote. And in this case, they had a roll call vote. So that means that if the Republican caucus has 9 members and maybe 2 were missing that day, they were actually down to maybe 7 or 8. So there were some Democrats who supported a roll call vote. Very unusual. But when you have a roll call vote, that's where the rubber meets the road and you can hold each individual representative to their vote. How did you vote?
Right. I love that too, because that really is true transparency.
That is.
When they can tell you how they voted. And so on this particular bill, so that you understand what happened, is the original bill, which was what is this bill number? This bill
1194.
1194, HB 1194.
Yeah, House bill.
So what happened is they had a House draft that was paused while they did the floor amendment votes.
Yeah.
Because both floor amendments failed, it went back to the original, which I believe was House Draft 2.
Yes.
And then they took a vote, and that passed.
Yeah, that passed by 34 yes, 2 excuse, and 15 no's.
Yeah. So actually, as you're watching this, the bill has been heard for the first time on the Senate. Because the Senate is hearing this on Friday.
It's going to be heard on the Senate Friday, March 14th. 2025 at 1:00 p.m. And get this, Eva, it's in the auditorium.
They're expecting a lot of people to turn out. Yeah. And you know what? I remember watching the process of this bill back in 2019. Yeah. We are talking a lot of people stood up. Now, it's interesting. Not everybody's arguing the religious freedom point of the argument. A lot of them are just arguing, if they're for it, it's because they believe there should be some kind of regulation, right? Licensing and all that. If they're opposed to it, it seems like there is some question about that process.
That's right.
Right? So it'll be very interesting to see what happens in the next hearing. So we might have to have another show to talk about what happened. Maybe we'll get a midwif. See, now even I'm doing it wrong. Maybe we'll get a midwife in here to talk about
that. Would be good. That'll be
yeah, it would be really, really good. So I'm curious, for those of you watching on YouTube, put a comment below. What do you think about this whole thing, and what do you think of Representative Bellotti's speech? Which I give her 2 thumbs up on that.
I
speech.
give her 2 thumbs up. and 4 turtles.
Yep. So, if you feel like the Lord is leading you to do this, why don't you send her a quick email at repbalati@capital.hawaii.gov or give her a call in her office and thank her for a well-reasoned, thought-out floor speech. I think she'd love to hear finally from people that are positive instead of it being negative.
Yes.
And Della, this is for you. So on the next time one of our issues come up, we're going to be waiting for you to fight for our religious freedom too, because we know that you're very fair.
Well, yeah, we know that she's aware of the constitutional mandate and the importance of protecting our First Amendment rights. So at least I know one of the 51 knows the legal basis, which is good.
You know Marcus long time, Della, so you can reach out to him with any thoughts on this. In the meantime, stay tuned for our show next week. Marcus and I are going to be talking about gambling, and we're going to talk about why gambling is so bad for the faith-based community, because while we can get thousands of people on vaccination bills and thousands of people out on midwifery bills, I'm very concerned that the Christian community is not seeing the danger in gambling.
It's even worse. It's bad for all people, not only the Christian community, the faith community, all people. Even the agnostics and atheists should pose this bill.
For babies, for grown-ups. It's just horrible.
Kupuna, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so make sure you come back and join us next week for the show. Make sure you like this video, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know every time we upload a new video. And make sure that you make comment below, because that helps the algorithms. Share this video with a friend. Right, Marcus?
I think they should. I'm here, right?
Mahalo, everybody. We'll see you next week.